Good evening. I don't know if anybody heard that, but she just asked that if anybody did not get a blue ticket. And we've got one. One person did not get a blue ticket here. Nancy, one person didn't get a blue ticket.
Where? I think it's two.
Right here? Right. Well, happy Valentine's Day, happy Ash Wednesday. Thank you all for coming out today. We have some competition here. Some people might not think the lecture might be the most romantic place on Valentine's Day, but hopefully you're all here because you love trains or you love the lecture series. And I do have to apologize in advance for this bad pun, but thank you for choosing us tonight. I'm a librarian and make no apologies for plays on words, however badly they might be received. Just a few quick announcements before we get started. For those of you who are new, the bathrooms are just out the hallway. If you take a left, the women's is on the right, the men's is on the left there. All the programs, just to say over there, all the programs are being recorded. So if you have to miss a program, you can always watch online. They're live streamed, so you can watch them live, or you can wait for the next day when the recordings go up on our website. All the recordings are broadcast live on our Facebook and YouTube channels. And finally, out of respect for our speakers tonight, we do ask that everybody silence their cell phones at this time. And just a plug for our children's programs. If you have children or grandchildren ages 3 to 5, we do have a program on Thursday evenings at 5 and Friday mornings at 10:30 p.m. or 10:30 a.m. That'd be really late story time for kids. It's little bookworms, story time and craft with Disagree. There are brochures for that on the back table. There's also brochures for the rest of the programs in this series on that back table as well. So pick one of each up on your way out. And tonight, this lecture series, the library has been partnering with the Greystone Viaduct Historical Education Society for the last 12 years to bring this winter lecture series to you every March and February and March. We're grateful for that partnership, and to tell you more about that, I'm going to pass the mic on to the chairman, or the committee chair of the winter lecture series, Erica Keller.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. I have very little voice, so I'm going to talk soft. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for sharing Valentine's Day with us. And we have a few exciting things coming up. One is next week. If you're a fan of coins, then we have an excellent lecture for you next week. We have the Osborne coinage with Patrick Hibble next week. And if you didn't get a flyer, we have some at the door. And also, we also have one of the upcoming lectures. Also, if anyone would be interested in Grocer and Viaduct, we're always looking for new members. And this is our new calendar for 2024. This is your gift with joining your membership. So if anyone is interested in that, we do have information on the back table about memberships. Now, without further ado, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Mr. Ed Maurer.
Good evening, and thank you for coming. This is a great turnout. Really appreciate everybody being here. This is a real privilege for me. This is the second time this week that I had the privilege to introduce Dan Frizzi. So many of you know Dan, local Bellaire young man here, and grew up in Bellaire. Noted historian, author. He's written 3 books, principally on railroading, and founder and the person responsible, in my opinion, for all the stuff, great stuff that the Greystone Viaduct Historical Education Society does. He had the vision many years ago to get this going, and it's turned into the restoration work that we've done across the street. The lecture series, our trips, and all that has come out of a lot of his vision. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Dan Frizzi.
Okay, can everyone
I guess everyone can't hear me. I can hear the reverberation of the. Aaron, is that? I think we're gonna have our librarian check that. Test, 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 test. I think that's better. Can everyone hear me? Good. Okay, well, thank you all for coming tonight. I knew that I was going to have competition from God and from Cupid because this is Valentine's Day and Ash Wednesday. So I knew that it was going to be difficult to get everybody to be here for this presentation. But what I would like to do is explain to you a little bit about what the presentation is going to be and what it's not going to be. This presentation is going to be based on photography work that I've done over the past 35 years. I started to take photographs of trains, railroad infrastructure about 35 years ago. And I did that with my children. I used to go on trips with my two boys, and we would go over into the mountains of Western Pennsylvania and West Virginia. And we used to take a lot of photographs of mountain railroading. Now, I'm not going to be showing those photos tonight. What I'm showing tonight is Belmont County railroads during 2023. I'm going to introduce this by showing you some of the things that we used to see within the last 35 years, but that we don't see anymore. But then I'm going to exclusively show you some of the trains that we still have here in the Ohio Valley. This is where it all began for me. This is a picture of my grandmother and grandfather's house in West Bellaire. And that wall is where I used to watch trains with my brothers from the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. We used to sit on that wall every time a train went by. We used to see the passenger trains. I remember seeing the conductor, the porters in the, in between the cars, hanging out, watching as they were passing by. We would see people sitting in the cars with business suits on, going to faraway places, west, east. So that's where, for me, my enjoyment of watching trains began. And it reminds me of something that I read in the history of Belmont County that was written by Henry Howell. Henry Howell was a famous historian of the counties of Ohio. He traveled from county to county, and he put together essays and the history of those particular counties. When he came to Belmont County, he was riding on the narrow gauge railroad, and he passed a home that was somewhere out by Jacobsburg or Key. And he wrote about how a little boy that was in the yard of the home that train was passing by hastened to the railroad tracks to watch that passing train. And he remarked in his history that the interest in locomotion is a grand human instinct. And it is something that I think is very, very true, because when a train passes by my office, I get up and I look out the window to see what it is, where it's going. And I think that probably all of us do something like that. But this is where my experience with trains first took place. The locomotive that you see there, That locomotive is the Grim Reaper. We'll have some slides as we continue on this evening that shows you what I mean by the Grim Reaper. But that is the last train that passed Clee Crossing. Where's the Riley relative? There's the Riley relative. There was a big brick house that sat right just down the tracks a few hundred feet, and that was the Riley residence, and that was the Clee Crossing. Because that house, I believe, was originally built by the Clee family. And it became the Riley home that I remember as a boy. Now, we don't have the traffic that we used to have back in the 1950s when I was a little boy. The trains that we have today are smaller. We don't have the businesses that utilize train deliveries like we had before. Here in Bellaire, we had many, many businesses that had rail delivery. How many people remember Malpedes? Malpedes used to get tank cars from California with wine, which they then bottled at the Malpede plant there on Union Street. Produce. When I was a little boy, I can remember going to the freight house down here on Crescent Street with my dad to get produce for our grocery store. Produce that came all the way from California in a refrigerated car. The Imperial Glass Factory. So all the glass factories. All of these places that industry existed here in Bellaire utilized the rails to be able to deliver the raw materials that they needed and the finished product that they produced. So trains are fewer in number. This is a photograph that I took in Bridgeport. If you know where you get off the exit ramp in Bridgeport, this is right by that pump station that sits there. I caught that train. Now, this is not a recent photo. This is an older photo. Here's a photo that is a more recent photo. Although you don't think trains still cross the bridge or travel through town, they do still exist. I had someone contact me. I posted a photograph of a train crossing the bridge here in Bellaire, and someone commented that I didn't think trains still want to cross that bridge. Well, they do. They do go across the bridge. It's just that they're not as often, and they sometimes come at inconvenient times so that you aren't there to see them when they pass. One of the things about trains is that they're very colorful. The Baltimore and Ohio, Southern, Norfolk and Western, all of these locomotives, Western Maryland, all of these locomotives had distinctive colors, okay? But with fewer railroads, with fallen flags of a lot of the railroad companies, we now don't have a lot of the color that we used to have. It's something like the airlines. If you remember Braniff used to have very colorful airlines. Eastern had that rainbow in blue that went up the tail. These kinds of distinctive colorings made photography very interesting and a lot of fun because you always saw something different. This particular photo is a photo that was taken up at 53rd Street in Bellaire and Burlington Northern Santa Fe. Up until the merger and Norfolk Southern took over the river route, we didn't see locomotives like that. Those were more Western, but now some of these locomotives we do see. Wheeling and Lake Erie. Wheeling and Lake Erie has been around in this area for a long time. So we do recognize Wheeling and Lake Erie when we see it. That is up in Rayland. That's in Rayland, the train is leaving the stone plant. If you look at the what's being carried in the hopper cars, you'll see that it's stone aggregate that's on its way to Martin's Ferry. Sometimes we see trains on the trestle. Everybody recognizes that as the Stanton curve in the movie Unstoppable. Sometimes we see trains over water. That's going across the bridge to Benwood. But we have to talk about the first railroad so that we get an understanding of what's happened to the railroads. The very first railroad that ever came into Belmont County was the Central Ohio Railroad. It came from Columbus, Ohio, and it arrived in Bellaire in 1854. This is a stock certificate that I have, and if you look here, you'll see the signature of the president on that stock certificate is Colonel John Hamm Sullivan, who is a man that I wrote a biography about. He was the president of the railroad when it actually arrived here in Bellaire in 1854. He was originally from Zanesville, and he moved to Bellaire once the railroad arrived. But in 1854, the Central Ohio Railroad simply terminated here at Bellaire. This was the eastern terminus of the Central Ohio Railroad. But soon it was taken over by the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad by 1876. And then we had the Cleveland, Lorain, and Wheeling Railroad that came to Bellaire in 1886. That is the railroad that comes from the north. It came originally through Bridgeport, and it's the train tracks that are on the elevated steel trestle that joins the viaduct right outside the library here. And then in 1973, became the Chessie system. And finally, CSX Transportation in 1986. CSX we had in Belmont County, but we no longer have CSX in Belmont County owning any of the rails. If we see a CSX train, it's going to be operated across the bridge from Benwood, and it's only going to be under trackage rights that it has with the Wheeling Lake Erie Railroad, because Wheeling Lake Erie Railroad now owns the bridge. CSX is no longer in Belmont County, which was a big loss. The Cleveland and Pittsburgh Railroad arrived in Bellaire just 2 years after the Central Ohio Railroad did. And the Cleveland and Pittsburgh Railroad went to Cleveland and Pittsburgh, and Bellaire became the southern terminus. If you look at the a map, it's Pittsburgh, it would be Pittsburgh, Cleveland. They joined at Wellsville, Ohio, and then the leg that came south was to Bellaire was the leg of the Y. The Pennsylvania Railroad took over the Cleveland-Pittsburgh Railroad in 1871, and then there was a merger between the Pennsylvania Railroad and the New York Central, and they formed the Penn Central in 1968. Then Consolidated Rail Corporation took over in 1976. Conrail. Conrail we recognized quite a bit here in Belmont County, primarily along the river route. And then in 1999, there was a big takeover of railroads in the east. The lines were divided up between Norfolk Southern and CSX. CSX shed lines that it had in Belmont County. Norfolk Southern picked up the Conrail line. So Norfolk Southern Corporation is now one of the dominant railroads that we have in Eastern Ohio. So we're served by only 2 railroads. Wheeling, Lake Erie, Norfolk Southern. Now, most of the railroad traffic that passes through Belmont County is traffic that simply passes through. In other words, they're passing through Bellaire, Bridgeport, Martins Ferry to get to someplace else. Wheeling and Lake Erie Railway, the tracks follow the river. The lines that used to go west, the CL&W through Bridgeport, Flushing, gone. The line between Bellaire, Neffs, Barnesville, gone. Okay, so the only rail traffic that we really have anymore is on the Ohio River. And these two lines parallel each other. Norfolk Southern Railroad took over the operation of the former Conrail. They have a yard in Mingo Junction. Wheeling and Lake Erie also has a yard in Mingo Junction. But Wheeling Lake Erie also has the ability to go west. So a lot of the traffic that comes into the Ohio Valley is coming in through Mingo. It would go through Hopedale to Mingo from further points west in the state of Ohio. Now, this is a photograph that I took probably 30 years ago. That is a photograph of a Conrail mine train that's headed to the Murray mines in Alledonia. That photograph was taken before, I think Route 7 may have been buying up property to build Route 7. But this is a photograph that was taken down by Pinch Run. This is another photo I took about 30 years ago. This is a photograph of the Cleveland Electric Illuminating Train, the CEI train, that used to go to the Murray mine in Capteen Valley, and it would bring coal to Cleveland Electric Illuminating up in Cleveland. You can see that photograph. You're never going to see it again. You know why? Because it was taken from the Bellaire Bridge, and you're not going to be able to get that photograph ever again. But you can see the long string of coal hoppers stretching back. We're talking 100 cars, 80 to 100 cars. This is a photo that I particularly like. This was a photograph that, once again, you won't ever get this photo again. It's gone. You know why? Because Route 7 is through Bellaire, and there's no way for you to ever get that photo. This is where the tennis courts used to be in Bellaire. Do you remember the tennis courts? How many people remember where the tennis courts were? Okay, that photograph was taken up by the tennis courts in Bellaire, and which would be above the swimming pool, the old swimming pool. Why do I like this photo? Well, because it had two tired old locomotives of the Baltimore and Ohio and Western Maryland Railroad. And that locomotive of the Western Maryland was probably the last of any locomotive that carried the colors of Western Maryland. Once again, that was about 30 years ago. We had a lot of coal produced in Belmont County 30 years ago, and you're going to see from some of these photos what we've lost. This is a mine train from the Murray mine, and I took this photo from I-470 bridge, and that's headed northbound. Here's a Saginaw mine train. That's in St. Clairsville. Okay, that's a mine train that's hauling coal from the Saginaw mine over the Wheeling and Lake Erie Railroad. You see the Wheeling and Lake Erie insignias there on the locomotives. In St. Clairsville, the coal trains were so long that they had to actually take half the train up through the tunnel to the other side, and then they would come back and get the remaining cars and bring them through the tunnel to the other side, and then connect the train again before they moved on. The R&F coal silo in Bellaire, Ohio, how many people remember that? Okay, anybody ever work up there? This is the train that would come from west of from the old Central Ohio line that went out to Lamira, and they would wash the coal in Lamira, and then they would bring the coal into Bellaire. In order to get up there with the train, they would have to take the train across the bridge to the switch that was right outside the library here. Then they would wait till the last car got past the switch. Then they would throw the switch and they would back the train up so that it could go on the Cleveland, Lorain, and Wheeling line up to North Bellaire. Marietta Coal also had a tipple in Bellaire where they loaded coal. You see that here. That is now gone. That used to sit right over top of the tracks, but it's gone. This is the Murray mine in Alledonia. Once again, that's shut down. Tracks are still there, but it's no longer in operation. And then this is the Saginaw mine that was in St. Clairsville. So the Grim Reaper, I talked about the Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper arrives. The CSX Newark Division rail was started to be torn up from Lamira into Bellaire. This is near Clarksburg, Ohio, west of Neffs. And here is the sled. This is a photograph of the rail sled. If you've never seen them tearing up rails, you're lucky, okay? But if the rails are going to be torn up, you at least want to be able to see what the sled does, because it's really amazing what it does. They take up a 1/4 mile of rail, okay, and pull that onto the rail train as they're tearing up the next 1/4 mile of rail. This is the sled, and you see the sled, okay, is tearing up the rails from the ties. This rail that you see here is the last part of the 1/4 mile that they tore up before they started to tear this section of track up. And this machine actually pulls the rails onto the rail car as the train is moving very, very slowly. You see right here the roller. The roller is what's lifting the rails off of the ties, and the spikes just pop out. This is another example of the rail sled, only this photograph was taken at the just east of Holloway, Ohio. Holloway was on the Cleveland, Lorain, and Wheeling Railroad line, and it was a huge, huge yard where there were rows and rows and rows of tracks filled at one time with coal from the Ohio Valley. This is going up the hill to Flushing, Ohio, to the Flushing Tunnel. And here you can see the rail sled tearing up the rails. You see this here? This is a section of rail that, as the train moves forward, that rail is being pulled right up onto the rail cars, which are up here behind this machine. it's something to watch. It's not something that you're going to get real happy about, because it's sad when you see them tearing the rails up, because that means there isn't going to be any more railroad traffic. And this is the last train to cross over the viaduct, which is now owned by the Great Stone Viaduct Society. This was in September of 1996. This is the pipe yard, the old pipe yard. The train is headed toward the bridge crossing the river. And this is the last locomotive set ever to cross over the viaduct up to the J Tower. Now, trains still do travel over the viaduct and across the bridge, but the part that we own, the Stone Viaduct Society, this is the last locomotive set ever to pass over that section of the viaduct. This is a map basically that shows that Mingo Junction to Bellaire. This is supposed to be a Wheeling Lake Erie map, but you can see all these different colors. There are a lot of little railroads that have taken over, purchased the railroad lines that used to be operated by Norfolk and Western. Because you can see here's the Columbus and Ohio River Railroad. This is part of the old Panhandle that went through Coshocton, Trinway, Frazeysburg. There's the Ohio Central Railroad. You can see the R.J. Corman Railroad. Wheeling and Lake Erie comes down from Brewster, Ohio, down to Bowerstown, and then goes through Hopedale before it arrives at Mingo Junction. Now the black is Norfolk Southern, and you can see Norfolk Southern goes all the way up around the Panhandle, the northern Panhandle, and it comes all the way down to Bellaire. Actually, it goes further than that. We're going to see how far it goes. It actually goes down below Powhatan and Clarendon to an interchange point down there. Okay, Benwood, West Virginia. Benwood is where you'll find CSX. CSX is pulled out of Belmont County, but they still have a yard in Benwood. It's not, as big a yard as what it used to be, but there still is a lot of traffic over there. The Wheeling and Lake Erie interchanges freight with CSX in Benwood, but to get there, they have to go across the Ohio River Bridge. Mingo Junction is another area where there's an interchange. Norfolk Southern interchanges with the Wheeling Lake Erie in Mingo. Okay, so now that you understand what we used to have and where it's all gone, we're now going to talk about the train traffic that has passed through Belmont County in 2023. This is a surprise coal train that came through across the Ohio River Bridge right out here and north on the CL&W line. The line is now owned by Wheeling and Lake Erie, but CSX has trackage rights and can run trains over it. And this is a coal train. That photograph I took at 48th Street in January of 2023. Here's that same train in Bridgeport, Ohio. Once again, the SOAR Authority's plant, where you're getting off the exit, there's a pump station there. Okay, this photograph was taken right over by that pump station. And I had my granddaughter with me when we were able to take these photos. Then in January, again, we had another train, CSX coal train. It was another surprise, something I wasn't expecting. But it also came across, and you could see by looking at this, these are all CSX hopper cars, and you can see the coal loaded in these hoppers. I was hoping that Vince Kalenich would be here tonight because I put the steeple of the Catholic Church in this photograph purposely for him, but I don't think he's here. That is taken just below the Dairy Queen. Here it is at Etnaville. Look at the coal. You know, a lot of people talk about coal like it's a dirty word, but boy, I think that's beautiful. I think a coal train is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Here is that same train in Martins Ferry, Ohio. And now we go to another railroad. This is the Norfolk Southern line that runs along the river. In February, I was able to catch the Norfolk Southern sand train at Dilly's Bottom. It runs along the river. It was headed down to the frac sand tipple down below Clarington, where the old Ormet used to be. And then on March the 1st, I caught that sand train coming back. After it had emptied its cars, it's coming back. This was taken on March 1st at Route 7, just above the I-470 interchange. Now you can still get that picture, but I'm not going to tell you how I got it. Route 7 North, there you can see the same locomotives you see Wheeling in the background. I'll mention Wheeling at this point. We have folks here from Wheeling tonight. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to be very nice. I'm not going to say anything nasty. But Wheeling no longer has any railroad traffic. Wheeling was the original eastern or western terminus of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. Yet there are no tracks left or service into Wheeling. The Cleveland, Lorain, and Wheeling Railroad that used to be never made it to Wheeling. It made it to Bellaire, and it joined the Baltimore and Ohio and crossed the bridge. But the name Cleveland, Lorain, and Wheeling was what that railroad was named. And it's sad, a great railroad town as Wheeling with some, fantastic architecture that they have there that was built by the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. The station, the magnificent station, that's what's left. March 16th, this was another Norfolk Southern train approaching 48th Street in Bellaire, Ohio. You can see it's springtime because you can see some flowers on this tree. I'm not sure what that tree is, but it had beautiful white flowers on it. And once again, the BNSF insignia, the orange and black. This particular train, once again, goes down and interchanges freight below Clarington. And there is a steel manufacturing facility down there that produces steel slabs. So this train sometimes does carry steel slabs in addition to scrap hoppers, small hoppers, and frac sand. April 6, 2023, I caught that train again in Dilly's Bottom, and there you can recognize the bridge that goes over to Boundsville. And Powhatan Point, the same train crossing Capteen Creek. I have to tell you, now this is, let's see, this was in April, okay? It's not actually warm in April, right? While I was here waiting for this train to come, there were two young girls over here on this bank that actually went swimming. And I didn't put a photograph in here to show you that, but believe me, they did go swimming. And I couldn't believe it because it was chilly, you know. And when they got up out of Captina Creek and climbed up the side, they thought I was taking photographs of them. Probably figured I was a pervert. But when they got up and walked across the bridge, I told them, they said, what are you taking photographs of? I said, I'm waiting for a train. I said, you better get off the bridge, it's coming. But I couldn't believe it that in April, they would even try to go in Captain Creek. April 13th, 2023. This is a Norfolk Southern train that's headed northbound. Do you recognize this building? That's in Bellaire. That's the National Glass Factory building, which was later the Rotifer offices. And there you see the Bellaire, the bridge, railroad bridge at the Baltimore, Ohio, in the background. April 24, another northbound Norfolk Southern. And I took this one up on Route 7, and you can see where I took it because there's that sign. The trees now are in full bloom, so you can't see Wheeling anymore. But it was basically taken at the same location, just a different time of the year. And that's another thing I should say. When you're taking railroad photographs, or any kind of a photograph, but especially railroad photographs, you might get a photograph that's beautiful 30 years ago. If you go back to that place today, you're going to find that it's blocked by trees. It's maybe blocked by buildings. You know, a perfect example of that is the Hempfield Tunnel in Wheeling. When I did a presentation on Baltimore and Ohio Railroad bridges, I wanted to include the Hempfield Railroad bridge in Wheeling. But doggone it, it is so difficult to find a way of being able to get a good photograph of that bridge because of the interstate, the ramp, trees. You just can't get the same kind of photos as what you may have gotten earlier. April 29th, another CSX coal train. That's the third one. April 29th. This one is at 38th Street. You can tell that's 38th Street because you see Peace Pipes advertisement. This is at the 48th Street overpass. Here you see the mine over, what's that, Shoemaker in Mounds, Benwood. This is in Martin's Ferry. This is that same section of track where Chris Pine was able to jump on the speeding locomotive to get it stopped while Denzel Washington was riding one of the hopper cars behind the locomotive. This is that same train again in Martin's Ferry at the turf care plant. I got up on some ties that were stacked along so that I could get up a little bit higher than what the track level was. And this is in Yorkville, Ohio, same train. Okay, now there is a very large loadout facility. It's called the Warrenton Loadout Facility. It's just above Tiltonsville. Do you know where the marina is by the golf course, north of Tiltonsville? Okay, this is where this loadout facility is located. Here you see the CSX coal train that is now in that loadout facility. They're going to unload the hoppers there. You see two tracks, two spurs here. They've actually added a third one. Since this year, 2023, they've now added a third spur up there. So there is a lot of railroad traffic that's taking place at this facility. There's coal and there's also frac sand an aggregate up there. This is a photograph of the Wheeling Lake Erie locomotives that are loading. You see the locomotives that are pulling the hoppers under the tipple so they can load the cars. Now, this is not a good picture, okay? But this is one of the problems. Getting a good photograph of the Wheeling Lake Erie on the trestle and crossing the bridge to Benwood is made difficult because they come later in the evening. They don't come during the daytime hours when you can get a really good photograph, okay? So you have to wait for the days to get longer so that it stays daylight longer. Well, this was taken probably, see, I don't think I said when it was. It was after May, sometime after May. And the days are still not as long. You want to wait until June if you want to get a long day. Well, this is the locomotive that was crossing the viaduct. And that was the first attempt that I made to get a good photo. Now, this was in May also. This is an aggregate train that's southbound to the Martins Ferry stone yard. And if you look here, you can see the aggregate in the hopper cars. This is once again Wheeling Lake Erie. And this train was coming from Mingo. That's where this train was coming from. Now, this train had locomotives on the front end and the back end. The back end locomotives were the ones that were going to be used to push these hopper cars into the yard in Martins Ferry, because in Martins Ferry, they have an unloading pit where they drop the stone, and then the stone is picked up and hauled up on a conveyor belt to a belt line. And the belt line then runs through the yard up to a conveyor, and the conveyor then drops the stone in piles around the yard. I think there's a photograph of that we may see. You see that locomotive? They're switching from the main track, which is here, and they're backing this entire stone train into the yard at Martins Ferry. This is the facility. This is the offload facility in the belt line. The train goes through this building. You can see the train here, and you can see the train over here. Okay? They push the train back through the building, and once they get the locomotive up here, and all the cars are pushed through, then they start to pull the train very slowly, and they unload each one of these cars down into a pit. These are conveyors that grab the stone, throw it up into this belt line right here, and then this belt line takes the stone off to a conveyor belt. It's a conveyor belt that takes it to a conveyor that's elevated, and it drops the stone in the yard. I just caught another train up there, I think it was probably in January, and the belt line was actually in operation, so I got some photos of that, but it wasn't 2023, so I didn't use it. Okay, May 30th, 2023. This is the Wheeling Lake Erie Railroad crossing the stone viaduct that is still in operation. That portion is still in operation. This is approaching Union Street. It's approaching Union Street. And there is that train going over Route 7, headed across the bridge. Now, once again, the light is not real good. And if you look here, if you look here, you see that? That's not rust. That's the light on the front of the train that's illuminating the steel there. So you see this, once again, they come later in the evening, so it makes it more difficult to get a good photo. These are pretty good photos. These were in June. Once again, the day's getting longer, so you have better opportunities to get the train. And I'll tell you how I got this. I'm not trying to rat on any of the engineers or conductors on these trains, but they often stopped at the Dairy Queen in Bellaire. So I talked to the owner and some of the employees there, and I said, "Do me a favor, will you?" I said, if the Wheeling and Lake Erie crew stops and they walk down to get something to eat, here's my card, call me so that I can get out on the bridge, on the viaduct that we now have out to the overlook, so that I would be able to get a photo of them. So they did, they called me, and so I was able to get out on the bridge in time to be able to catch the train and take that photo. That was June. That was my first photographs, better photographs of trains on the viaduct from the vantage point of the overlook on the walking trail. This is another photo. These are photos of that same train. Let's see, I think it is the same train. Yeah, same train. And that's going past the First National Bank building. And this is the train passing over Union Street passing over Belmont Street as it's approaching Union Street to cross the bridge. And there you see the bridge ahead of the train there. This is that same train returning from Benwood, West Virginia, but now the locomotives are switched. You see the Wheeling Lake Erie locomotive is first. This older Wheeling Lake Erie locomotive is second. One of the good things about this train is that when it goes across the river, it switches cars. It switches freight with CSX. It's an interchange over there. So you know that when the train has passed through Bellaire, it'll be about 30 minutes, that train will be coming back. So when I was on the viaduct after seeing it pass to West Virginia, I stayed there and then was able to get this photo of it coming back. This is June 15th, 2023, crossing 32nd Street. This here is the area of the old pipe yard. The Great Stone Viaduct Society now owns that property. And it looks in a lot better condition than what it did when the railroad had it. This is another stone train, aggregate train, June 29, 2023. Do you see how hazy it is? You know why that is? It was the fires. It was the fires, the forest fires from Canada, and it was very, very smoky. Okay, but this is that aggregate train. Once again, it's backed through the facility, the pit, where they drop the aggregate. Here you see the belt line. The belt line runs this way. It drops the stone on this belt line, and then it continues on up the tracks to the conveyor that actually piles the stone in a pile. This is easy to know where this is. This is the City of Martins Ferry water treatment plant with the Wheeling and Lake Erie passing in July. Once again, that train is returning to Mingo from Benwood. And this is same train northbound at the aggregate facility in Martins Ferry, Ohio. This access road, very, very close to the railroad tracks. You see the speed limit, 12.5 miles an hour? These trains on this section of track are not allowed to operate very fast. Anybody know where this building is? That's the casket factory down in Shadyside. Now, this is July of 2023. This is a southbound train in Shadyside. Anybody here from Shadyside? There you go. I'm sorry?
They own the Belmont casket.
Oh, okay. Well, you can let them know that I included them in this presentation. Now, this is where the interchange takes place below Clarington. You see these locomotives. These locomotives have delivered a train to the interchange, and they're stationary. They're waiting to be returned back to Mingo. And you can see the power plant in the background, the stacks of the power plant. July 23, here's another wheeling in Lake Erie. It's darkness is falling on Bellaire as I take this photo. This is a photo. Who knows where this photo was taken? Any idea? I'm sorry, say it louder. Is that what it says? Okay, who knows what's at 41st Street? Where's the swimming pool? 41st Street or 43rd Street? 42nd, the swimming pool? Okay, this actually is crossing 41st Street, but I took this at the swimming pool, at the old swimming pool. I drove in, parked there. I believe my wife was with me when I took this photo. She's been with me for a lot of these photos. This is August 5th, 2023, Norfolk Southern. Now, we're going to talk about the diamond. One of the things that you need to remember is that the railroad that gets there first gets the best trackage, okay? The first railroad that came into Bellaire from the north was the Cleveland and Pittsburgh Railroad. So it got to take the higher ground. It got the best trackage, okay? The Cleveland, Lorain, and Wheeling Railroad got there later. So they had to take what was left. And in order for the Cleveland, Lorain, and Wheeling Railroad actually was closer to the river, more prone to flooding. And it was simply because, the Cleveland and Pittsburgh was there first. So they had to take what was left. Okay, well, in order for the Cleveland, Lorain, and Wheeling to be able to approach the bridge of the Baltimore and Ohio crossing over the river, they had to cross over the Cleveland and Pittsburgh tracks. And this is where that took place, right here. Okay, now this is, you can see this from where the swimming pool is, okay? But today, you have to walk up the tracks to be able to see what we're looking at here. You see this? You see that? That is the signal. This is a mandatory stop because it's a diamond. Because it's a diamond. It's a mandatory stop. Trains have to stop. Whether you're Wheeling Lake Erie, whether you are Norfolk Southern, there's a mandatory stop at that point. And if the switch is not thrown in the proper position for you to pass, you have to get out, walk up, and you have to throw the switch. If it's this way, Norfolk Southern has the right of way. But if it's this way, Wheeling Lake Erie passes. you can always tell who the last train was to pass by simply looking at this signal. This way, it's Norfolk Southern. This way, it's Wheeling Lake Erie. How many have seen this signal from Route 7? If you drive up Route 7, you can. And you look off to the right, down where the old Delta Concrete plant was, you will be able to see that signal, and it's lit. You have red lights. You'll be able to see them even at night. And that's the reason why that signal is there, is because it's a crossover and therefore it's a mandatory stop. September 11th. Now this is a photograph that I did not take. This is a photograph that my wife took. We were coming up Route 7 and I happened to look over. I always look at the signal. Okay, and you can see here, see the signal is vertical. It's not horizontal, it's vertical. That means that Wheeling Lake Erie has the right of way to cross the Norfolk Southern tracks. We were coming up Route 7, and I happened to see that train sitting here, okay, getting ready to proceed. So I stopped the car on the bridge, and I had Penny get out of the car with my camera, and she snapped all of the photographs that I have of this particular train. And then we got off at Route 7 and came back down to Bellaire, and we got the same train as it was crossing the Ohio River over the bridge. Now, you see this cross? Everybody know what that's for? That's a state line marker. That's a state line marker. As you go across, okay, this marks Ohio. It says Ohio. This is the Ohio state line. Okay? So on the other side, it's going to say West Virginia. In other words, when you pass that sign, that's the West Virginia state line. That means you're going into Ohio. On this side, it's Ohio, and it means you're going into West Virginia. That's the state line marker. There's that same train crossing over the bridge to West Virginia. December 4, 2023. We're getting close to the end of 2023. You see these Norfolk Southern engines that have delivered down to below Clarington. They don't have anything to bring back with them, so they're on their way north back to Mingo Yard. And this is that same train in Bridgeport, Ohio. And this is that same train in Martins Ferry, Ohio. There you can see the golden arches, and that's the Hanover Street interchange down there. You know where I took that photo from? Where?
The walkway by the hospital.
The walkway by the football field. I climbed up about 2 sets of stairs and got up there and was able to take that photo. December 21, 2023. This is my last photo for 2023. This is the Nichols Bakery in Martins Ferry. Now, I called the plant manager and I asked him about deliveries. And he said they get 2 trains or 2 hoppers a week. 2 deliveries a week. There's 2 hoppers here. This delivers flour to the bakery. Okay. Problem is they don't deliver it during the daytime hours. They deliver it at night, you know, and so it's very, very difficult to be able to catch the interchange, because they have to close down Route 7 to get those hoppers over there to this siding at Nichols. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
Other than the Dairy Queen story, do you just happen to see these trains coming by, or you have a schedule? How do you get these pictures?
Well, My office is, my office is on 32nd Street. So, I mean, I hear the trains. I hear them. That's how I know they're passing. And then the other thing is that I hear trains when other people don't. Any other questions? Yes.
My mother worked at the B&O office in Bellaire, but I can't remember where it was.
Okay.
I remember walking.
You're talking about the station?
She was a CPA.
Okay, and
A little office.
a little office, okay, could have been one of two places.
This would have been in the 1950s or 55.
Okay, I would say one of two places. The train station, you know where Union Street Station restaurant was? Over on Union Street by the Viaduct?
Yes.
You remember that restaurant? Directly across the street from that restaurant was where the train station was of the B&O. Okay, so it could have been there. Later, they moved that platform to over here by J Tower, which is right here where right outside the library. If you walk over there, you'll still see the supports for what was called J Tower. And that's where they started to let people get on the trains during the last years that the train ran. Any other questions? Yes.
It's not so much a question as perhaps of general interest. I actually rode the last train between Maynard and Barton. The way that worked is it's the rail train.
Yeah.
I was postmaster in Maynard at the time.
Okay.
They couldn't get radio contact from the engine back to the dispatcher. Came in and borrowed my phone to tell them where they were. They then invited me to come out, get on the engine, and ride the engine down to Barton from Maine.
To Barton, yeah.
The very last train,
Yeah.
because they took the track with them.
Yeah. I had the opportunity to ride with a crew of CSX from Martins Ferry to Benwood and back on the what was called the Martins Ferry Local. And that was the last train ride that I had around here. Probably most of you remember the train for the All-American Days that took people back and forth across the bridge. This was back in the 70s.
Thank you, because I've been saying, I remember that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm nuts.
No. Right. It backed up. Yeah, they had a locomotive, a single locomotive, and it was all arranged by Anthony DeMarco, who was the mayor of Bellaire. And he worked for the B&O Railroad. And he arranged that and was allowed these trips to take place. Any other questions?
So how does Penny like your hobby here, and how long have you been married?
Well, interesting that you asked that question. You meet a lot of interesting people when you are along the tracks. You really do. Now, Penny and I didn't meet along the tracks. But this is over in western Pennsylvania. This is on Sandpatch Grade. And Penny and I were there in the wintertime, as you can see. And there weren't a lot of trains running that day for some reason. So I got the tripod out and we went out onto the tracks. And I particularly like these two photos because this is at the summit of the Alleghenies, 2,258 feet, a very, very famous marker of the CSX railroad. And this is one of the signals. You see it's a red light, okay? So I felt a little bit more comfortable being out there. But these are photos that I took. And Penny, happy Valentine's Day. Yes.
Since we've had so much train information, I'd like to invite everyone in the room to join us for our train trip, sponsored by the Greystone Viaduct through Uniflow Travel. It will be July 20th, and if you're interested in our train trip, it is on our Facebook page.
We have flyers here.
It has flyers, and it is also on our website. So join us on our train trip.
4-hour train trip.
It's a day trip.
It's a day trip. It's a 1-day trip. We've done these before. We're going to have 2 train trips for the Viaduct Society this year. We use these as fundraisers. We've engaged Uniglobe to arrange all of our travel. And the first trip is down in West Virginia. We're going to motor coach to Elkins, West Virginia. And then we're going to ride the new Tiger Flyer. Beautiful, beautiful scenery. It's a 4-hour train trip, out and back. So if anybody is interested in going, make sure that you pick up one of the flyers and get your reservations in. The second trip that we're going to be doing is we're going to be going on Amtrak from Pittsburgh to Altoona, Pennsylvania. And we're going to be visiting the Horseshoe Curve, the museum in Altoona. We'll be picking up the return trip to Pennsylvania, the Amtrak Pennsylvania. That'll be coming back that afternoon, and we'll get back into Pittsburgh about 9 o'clock that evening. So these are 1-day trips, okay? They're not trips that are going to be, it's not going to be an inconvenience for you. We motor coach to the train stations. The train travel takes care of itself. And then we return. So if anybody's interested in going, please pick up one of these flyers. This is our first trip, and this one is July the 20th, 2024.
Included in the price is the bus trip, the train ticket, and also a box lunch.
Yeah. So we hope you'll join. Some of you have. I see some people here who have been on our trips before. So we encourage you to participate. If you are a Greystone Viaduct member, you get a discount on the train trip. You don't pay the regular price. And if you are a member, you get to bring a guest at that same member price. Okay, if there's no other question, okay, there is one.
I guess there's nothing left of the Holloway line in either direction now.
No, the rails have been torn up. Yeah, the rails are torn up. And that one photograph of the rail train was going up the hill towards Flushing. Yeah.
Fan trip from Cleveland to Holloway.
Right. Uriksville, yeah. That went out to Dover. That line went out to New Philly, Dover area. Right, Holloway was a really big yard. Listen, folks, thank you very much. I appreciate you all coming. Don't leave yet. We've got to pull your tickets out. Yeah, pull your tickets out.